Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'll just start with the opening dua before we start the program. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Indeed, all praise is for Allah. We praise Him, we seek His help and ask for His forgiveness. We seek Allah's refuge from the evils of ourselves and from our evil actions. Whomsoever Allah guides, none can misguide, and whomsoever Allah misguides, none can guide. I bear witness that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah, alone having no partner. I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is His slave and His messenger. First of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity today. Like yourself, I'm a student of Seerah. I studied Seerah here at Manchester, but purely from a hobby point of view. It's not something that I profess to be an academic or imam or whatever. It's just an interest. I've been very fortunate enough to go and visit a lot of the sites which we'll talk about today, and having seen it first-hand experience, and that's what I'd like to sort of impart with the rest of everybody. The time allocated is about an hour, I believe, so somebody will have to remind me when the time is up. And we'll allow about 10 minutes for question and answers at the end as well. If you could just judge it accordingly and just give me a nod and I'll stop. Today's subject is the Great Battle of Badr. And there's so many lessons to be gained from this, all at different levels. An hour is not long enough, trust me. So I was in a dilemma to whether to shorten it and just have a quick overview of it, or should we just have slightly longer and just take it up to the point that we can take it up to. And then if you still enjoy it and you want me to come back, I'd be glad to come back and finish it off as well. Okay. The Battle of Badr, really, you have to understand the events that led up to the Battle of Badr. So a lot of it is just setting the scene, so we have a little bit more of a grasp of all these sort of events leading up to the great battle. The battle itself is just a event, but there's lots of reasons for this, and that's what we'll try and set early on. Battle of Badr itself was during the second year of Hijrah. So this is after the Muslims have migrated up to now Medina, what used to be Yathrib at the time, but now it's become Medina, the city. And the Muslims came in small numbers. So they would leave Mecca in ones, twos, or small groups, and then end up in Medina. And really, this was forced upon them. The whole sort of situation had become unbearable in Mecca. The kuffar were now violent with the Muslims. They were actually stopping them, even to the point which we all know that the Prophet ﷺ was threatened with assassination, and through the qadr of Allah, then he was guided and he ended up in Medina. Some of the people left under the sort of at night time under the shade away, so the kuffar couldn't follow them, didn't know who was leaving. There was always a few, the likes of Hazrat Umar, who he was never going to hide his departure. It was always going to be, yes, I'm going and here I am. Anybody wants to challenge me, I'll be there at this time. Come and meet me and I will give you the taste of death. But on the whole, because the Muslims at that time were of a lower, I don't like to use the word class, but they were of a lower standing, and they didn't have the strength, the financial strength, or the reputation, the status. They were of a lower sort of standing. So they left in the quiet of night and ended up in Medina. But you can imagine, the Muslims have landed in this strange environment. Yes, some of them had relatives there, and yes, they had some connections, but on the whole, Medina was relatively new to them. Different environment, different layout, even climatically, Yathrib or Medina was different from Mecca. And the people of Medina were different as well, completely different people. And coming to a new surrounding, no houses, no land, it must have been really very, very difficult for them. And the two groups now in Medina, you've got the emigrants who have come up, and then you've got the Ansar, or the people, the helpers, who are helping the Muslims settle in. And never before in history have you seen something like this, where there's a mass exodus and people are coming and setting up in this new environment. And the people of Medina were so welcoming. You know, there was a big difference in this. But difference was that whereas in Mecca you had a sort of clear divide, non-Muslim, Muslim. In Medina there was this new third sort of group of people. Third group of people were, anybody? No? The people that professed to be Muslim, but deep down they hadn't accepted the religion of this. And these are called the hypocrites. People, and so this new sort of third dilemma was difficult for the Muslims because you just didn't know if they were following the right path or not. Even outwardly they would say yes, yes, but then deep down they still had their old enemies and the problems that they were causing from that. And the Prophet ﷺ, you know, as he sort of came and settled there, they one of the names that come to mind is Ibn Ubay. They were getting ready to coronate him as the mayor of Medina, and for somebody like him to be thrown aside and the Prophet ﷺ coming in his place was very, very difficult to sort of take in, and he remained this person throughout, you know, this little edge that he always had. Yes, he confessed and he accepted Islam, but deep down, he never really did. And then there was his cousin who was known as the monk. The monk professed to be on the Abrahamic line, but when challenged by the Prophet ﷺ, he had no answers because obviously he wasn't guided. And he ended up leaving with a small band of people and leaving and going back out into the wilderness. But then there was also an existing group of Jews there as well. Now the Jews were in quite strength, you know, they weren't just normal, you know, these people have been there for centuries. And there's various sort of narrations why the Jews ended up there, because Jews by nature are tradespeople, they're business people. And all the business is actually done in Mecca. And why would they go to Medina and settle there? Some of the sort of thought is that from their forefathers, they knew that there was this great prophet coming at some stage. And they were there for the preparation of the coming of the prophet. But these were quite considerable, solid groups and quite well-to-do. You know, they'd set up their own trading houses and their businesses, but distinct group there. So when the Prophet arrived in, so he had all this extra stuff to deal with, you know. But as the Muslims left Mecca, they abandoned all their goods. They left all their personal belongings, their land, their houses, everything was just left in Medina, in Mecca. And for the kuffar, they just confiscated it all. That's all that they could do. So the start of what we're going to talk about really emanates from there, because the people of Mecca were business people, they were traders, they were brokers, they would buy some from one person, sell it to another person, and this was their only form of income. They had their established trade routes. You know, during the spring and summer, they would go north to the Roman, Byzantine, Bostra, and all these areas, the wider Syria as it's known. And then in the autumn and winter, they would go down to the Yemen side of things. And these were long established trade routes. You probably recall when the Prophet ﷺ was just a child, and he accompanied his uncle up to the north as well. So these were established trade routes that the various tribes and groups used to go and trade and buy and bring back. I normally end up giving Because to understand any part of Syria, you have to have an understanding of the various tribes and their alliances and the groupings and who was affiliated to who. But really that's for another time, and inshallah some other time that we'll talk about that. So this particular sort of trade that was going to go, this caravan that was going to go, was particularly very big this time because the people of Mecca had confiscated all the belongings and either sold them or had extra to take up to the Syrian side this time. And this was a huge caravan that they were going to go, and for them this was profit. They were going to make huge profit, bring it back, sell it, make even greater profit. But this was confiscated goods that they've taken over from the Muslims that sort of abandoned it and left and went up to Mecca. So the Prophet ﷺ, because on both sides, whether you're in Mecca or whether you're in Medina, there was always this transient people, the Bedouins, who would give information of various things that were happening. And word had got to the people, the Muslims, that there was this huge trade caravan that was going to go, bigger than anything else that the whole peninsula had seen before. And the Prophet ﷺ was aware of this as well. There was also at this, round about this period of time, the exact is not actually noted, but the revelation had come because while the Muslims in Medina were staying, they were very appeasing. They would always give in, or they would talk nicely because of settlement. They were in new environments. They had to do this. And the revelation had come that giving permission for the Muslims to fight, to defend, to actually, and this was quite a new thing for the Muslims. In many ways, for the likes of Sayyidina Hamza or Umar, this was a godsend because these were true warriors and they were, very fearsome people, and to be given that permission to fight back was completely revolutionary for them, which they welcomed with open arms. So, if you allow me, I'm going to just draw the map. I hope you can all see it. Just to give you a little bit of context of the locations that we're talking about. And please ignore, because my drawing's not the best. So, the Arabian Peninsula. So you've got Jeddah, you've got, roughly guided, it's not to any scale, so you've got Mecca, and then you've got Medina. So like we talked about, the trade routes going down to the Yemen, which was sort of that area, and then the northern routes going into Iraq or into the wider Syria, as it was known at that time. So they would go, and a lot of the time they would take this coastal route up, or close to this coastal route, but a little bit in from that side. But in Mecca, just to give you a little bit more sort of background, one of the leaders, one of the chieftains, and there were two main tribes in Medina, the Aus and the Khazraj, but one of the leaders there was a close alliance to one of the chieftains of Mecca. And the chieftain, you probably heard the name, Umayyah ibn Khalaf. He was the same guy that caused all the problems for Bilal and whatever. But and the chieftain from Medina, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, who we'll know throughout history as a great Muslim leader as well. But they were actually friends from before. And whenever Umayyah would go up, he would stop at his house, and vice versa. Whenever he would come down, he would come and stay with Umayyah as well. And during one of the trips into Mecca, Sa'd stayed with, as it was a normal practice. And as he's staying there, it was norm for people to do the tawaf of the Kaaba, even Muslims and non-Muslims. The Kaaba always had this religious, even though at that time they had all the so-called gods, but people, even the Muslims and non-Muslims, would still go and do the worshipping and do the tawaf of the Kaaba. And Saad is there staying with Umayyah, and he's done his business, and he's seeking permission to go and pay his respect and go and do the tawaf. And he's asking Umayyah, what time should I go? And Umayyah, because he'd come down from Medina, and this animosity between Mecca and Medina was still there, he suggested that he goes at the peak, at noon, when the sun is the highest, thinking in his mind that he would go at a time when not many people would see him there. And there was this threat that he may be attacked, or he may be, disrespect to him. And as a guest of his, he couldn't allow that. He would have to, stand for him. So they go at noon, he's doing the tawaf, and the old adversary, Abu Jahl sees him. And, it's strange because Abu Jahl, the name itself, that wasn't his real name. His name was Hakim. And Abu Jahl is the father of ignorance. How crazy is that? In modern terms, like when we, youngsters especially, when you want to say something is good, you say, that's bad. It's the same concept. He's given this name of father of ignorance, and who would want to be called father of ignorance? It's a double sort of meaning to it. But he was very proud of the name because he was causing all these problems for the Muslims. So Abu Jahl spots him, and as is his nature, he can't resist. He goes over to him, and obviously chieftain, they recognize it, and he's saying almost like, how dare you come? You support the Muslims. And it wasn't known that he had already converted or he'd accepted the Shahada, but he's asking, how dare you come into our land doing tawaf and this and this and this? And, if it wasn't for Umayyah, I would not let you do this. And this, because of the Arab mentality, Saad automatically responded. He says, you think this is bad? You know what we can do? And we will stop your trade routes. And he almost threatened. So that thought process of coming and stopping was there from an earlier stage. So the Prophet ﷺ gets wind of this big trade caravan coming. So immediately the Prophet ﷺ takes a group of about 150, and at that time mainly he would take the muhajirun, the emigrants. And this is once again one of the greatnesses of the Prophet ﷺ, that because it was all new, he didn't want to put burden upon the Ansar. He would take his own family, he would put them in danger rather than taking the local Ansars. So they march, and they literally march, and as the trade route is going past, they intercept it after it's actually gone past, and they end up, so Badr is closer to Medina, but it's actually further from Mecca. And they passed, and they met up a place called Ushara. Can everybody see it? It's maybe a little bit difficult, yeah. So they arrived there, but by this time, the actual caravan had already passed, and they just missed it literally by half a day. And this was quite disappointing because obviously they've come out, and their purpose of coming out is to get revenge, to get back their goods and recover some of the belongings, because they'd come empty-handed, and the revelation had come that they could go out and defend and get their goods. But the disappointment was that they'd missed it. So in some ways, it was still successful because the Prophet ﷺ was able to do some agreements with some of the tribes in that area and make alliances with them, because that was the order of the day. They needed to strengthen themselves. They didn't want to be weak, and they needed to strengthen themselves. So they ended up doing various agreements with the various outlying tribes and then headed back. But then this caravan that was coming up was led by Abu Sufyan, and he was a youngster in the hierarchy of the Quraysh, but he was an aspiring leader. He had that leadership qualities about him. And he got wind of the Muslim people coming, but he'd already gone safe. And in his own intellect, he sent message back to Mecca, because he knew that he's going to come back down again. And at some stage he would be coming back, and that threat of attack would remain. And so therefore, he'd sent word back to Mecca that prepare yourselves, because there may be an issue. But even then, there wasn't any conflict or whatever. It's important to also remember that Badr, or it's actually known as the Ghazwa Kubra, the big, great battle. So this is actually known as the Ghazwa Subra. It's actually the lower one, the smaller one. So no actual conflict done, agreements are made, the Kuffar, Quraysh carry on their journey, go and do their business, but they are alerted to this threat now, this threat that looms over them, that when they return, there may be some issues. At the same time, the Prophet ﷺ started sending out scouts, which was normal really. It wasn't exceptional, but they would send out in small groups, ones and twos, gather information, get intelligence, gather the details of it. And at that time, he also sent out a group of 8 people. And the leader of the 8 people was Abdullah ibn Jash. And the group were directed to head northeast. So from Medina, they would go in that direction. And Abdullah was carrying a letter from the Prophet ﷺ. And the instructions was, do not open this letter. Open it after 2 days, exactly 2 days. Because this was now a game of espionage. This was, it's a war footing. They had to share information, but they had to be secret about it as well. They didn't want to alert anybody. And that concept of surprise had to remain. So Abdullah leaves Medina, goes in a northeasterly direction. 2 full days they've been traveling, small group of 8 people. As they landed on the second day, as per the instructions of the Prophet ﷺ, he opens the letter, and the letter makes it clear to travel south. And they wanted, and his instructions was, gather information about the southern route, see what's happening down here, and gather the information, report back. So from there, they loop around and come close enough to Makkah, but not quite. In fact, it was sort of looping around. So you got Makkah there, you got Taif there. Like I mentioned, I've had the privilege to go to some of these places and see these, and some other places as well. I mentioned that I ran an airline and we worked in Saudi, and some of the remote places, Al-Arar, Al-Juf, Bisha, Tabuk, all these places I've been to as well. So I can relate to some of these places there. And some of them are very, very strange. There's a city, sorry, we're going a little bit off tangent, but Bisha, it's a strange phenomenon. I've never seen it before. People walk past and there's a grave, and as they're going past the grave, they take the shoe off and hit this grave and then carry on. Or they would walk past and spit at this grave, which is strange. Even to this day, they do this. And, to see something like this, it's actually unusual. And then when I asked, they were saying this is where the burial place of the guide that when Abraha attacked Mecca, and this is where he ended up, the guide that brought them. So he's regarded as a traitor. So as a traitor, they have to show their sort of vengeance against him, even to this day. So anyway, that's just going off the tangent a little bit. So they end up between Mecca and Taif. And the name of this place is called Nakhla. Okay. They arrive, and it's the last day of Rajab. We're in the month of Rajab, and they end up there, and they just settling down. They're just about to set up their camp and prepare for food and whatever, and they see this small caravan, about 8-9 camels coming. Camels are fully laden with goods, and they're in this dilemma now. The Prophet ﷺ didn't give instructions to attack, so that's number one. The big thing for them was Rajab was one of the Hurum months, it's the sacred months. And in the sacred months, you're not allowed to fight. No bloodshed, no sort of, so they're in this real dilemma, and they're at this point where if they don't do anything, the caravan is going to pass by. So they're going to lose this, and 8-9 camels full of goods was a sizable sort of booty, sizable sort of amount for them. So they're thinking, what should we do? What should we do? And if time's ticking away, and they eventually make a decision that they're going to attack. And they attacked. In fact, they killed one of the persons, and they got the booty. I mean, because the Quraysh didn't expect an attack from the south. If anything, they were looking, and they would get the attack from the north, but the south, so they wouldn't send soldiers with this either. So they ended up making an attack, getting the goods, and they're actually leaving, and they took two prisoners with them as well. Arriving back in Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ, he's saying, look, I didn't ask you to attack these people. You know, this was not what was asked for you. But, you know, I don't want any of this, you know, these goods. This is not right for me, and I don't want any of this. But the bigger thing that came out of this was that the Quraysh used this. Quraysh used this to the point that it's, you know, the whole of the peninsula, word got out. They actually sent news to everybody and all the tribes, and look at what these new Muslims are doing. Look what they've done. They've violated the sacred month and this holy month and this and this and this. And they went to town. It was a big PR sort of stunt for them. And basically trying to get them on their side and, you know, gain their sort of loyalty, whatever. Eventually, you know, the revelation came, and the Prophet ﷺ was able to sort of take on this, take on the booty, and they utilized it. But these are two main events, and if you think about it, because the first bloodshed actually happened there. So people generally think that Badr was the big first battle for the Muslims, but essentially, this was where an actual attack actually took place. So in some ways, this is regarded as the first battle or the first conflict that the Muslims had. Also, it's important to understand, I mentioned the word Ghazwa. Ghazwa is, you probably all know, but Ghazwa is where the Prophet ﷺ himself participated. So, and we distinguish between that and the expeditions that he instructed other people to go on, the Saraya. So in total, the Prophet ﷺ went on 18-19 Ghazwats, depending on how you look at Hunain, whether Taif is considered or Hunain as a collective one is looked at for another time. And then the Sarayas are like the Nakhla. This was where he had instructed or sent out team, and they went and did the attack. So coming back to this journey up to Bosra in Syria, this is quite an arduous journey, but the Quraysh were well used to it because they did it so often. And then obviously they had to return as well. And now this was to be the important bit, because coming back, they had 1,000 camels. You know, 1,000 camels is a huge amount, fully laden with goods and with, and the goods could be anything, you know, whether it's food items, whether it's leather, whether it's perfume, cloth, all different ones, but this was what the Muslims would bring back. And 1,000 camels, you can imagine how much that they would be carrying. We can't even calculate it because obviously it was a different era, different currency and different values. But roughly speaking, at the lower end of the estimates, it was estimated round about $5 million worth of goods, which even today's climate is quite a substantial amount. So the caravan is coming, and the other thing to bear in mind that the actual soldiers was only there was only 40 soldiers for 1,000 camels, which is nothing really, you know, comparatively. One soldier is looking after, you guys know maths better, 20 odd, camels. Now, you know, this is a huge amount for the Muslims to get. So they were not going to miss out this opportunity to gather this. So once again, the Muslim army, not the army, because this was a raid that the Muslims was going to, because they through their intelligence, they knew that it was not well guarded. So they would be able to overcome people quite easily. So the Prophet ﷺ had sent scouts once again on this route. And the scouts would come back and give the information and say, you know, yes, they've got 1,000 camels, yes, they've got 40 soldiers looking after it. And for the Muslims, this was an easy, you know, it was going to be easy for them to go and overcome them and bring the goods back. And once again, smaller groups of 2s and 3s would go out and bring along this whole route, they would get information from them. To the point where they've got the information, the scouts were staying, and the caravan passed by them. They've got all the information. But Abu Sufyan, being Abu Sufyan, he needed to know what exactly was going on. And he's gone out himself. And this is quite unusual because the leader of the group doesn't normally go out. He would send people out. And we'll come to it in a little while, but there was only 2 occasions that I know of that the Prophet ﷺ would go out and scout himself. And so here, for Abu Sufyan to go out was unusual, but he wanted information firsthand. So he goes out and he sees the camp, or he knows where the camp, he sees some Bedouin people, and he's asked the question. These Bedouin people are strange as well because these are information carriers. They are nomadic people. They go from one place to the other, and all they do is gather information from one side to the other side, and they remain neutral. They are not participants in the actual conflicts. So Abu Sufyan's gone. He's asked the Bedouins, have you seen any unusual activity? And the Bedouin has said, yes, there was a couple of guys, they were here a couple of days ago, they were camped over there. He goes over to this camp, or this area, and he sees camel dung. Sorry to use the word, and he's able to actually touch it and feel it, and he sees the date pips inside, and he knows for sure. This is where he's got the confirmation that something is not quite right. And something needs to be done. And this was the final sort of information that he needed. For him now, he came back to his own caravan and he gave the fastest camel to a person. The person is named Dum Dum, of all names. And so he sends Dum Dum saying, go full speed, go as fast as you can, day and night travel, go and tell the Quraysh to prepare themselves. The danger is imminent. And off he goes, he's riding, and he goes to the... But just in Mecca, just before he had arrived, and you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything is from the qadr of Allah, but whether you call it coincidence or whatever, but it's all from the qadr of Allah. And it's important because now we've got really 2 flanks. We've got the Muslims from Medina, we've got the Meccan Quraysh, and then we've got this caravan that's coming up and down. And before Damdam arrived, one of the aunts of the Prophet ﷺ, her name, Atika. Atika was a full aunt of the Prophet ﷺ. She was the sister of Abu Talib and Hazrat Abdullah. So she was a full aunt of the Prophet ﷺ. And she had a dream. And the dream was quite strange. She woke up in the morning, she'd had this dream, and in the dream, she saw this crier coming into Mecca, and he's saying, oh, you know, trouble is ahead, and prepare yourselves. And in the dream, she sees because as somebody would come into Mecca, there was a certain mountain. You can still see it there today. Apart from Safa and Marwa, there's the Mount of Qubais, where people usually made the announcements. And this crier has come. He's gone up to the mountain, and he's warning the people of Quraysh. He's telling them danger is looming. And not only that, he then picks up, and this is in her dream, picks up a rock, and the rock he throws, and it rolls down the mountain. As it rolls down the mountain, it breaks into pieces and goes and hits all the households of Mecca. I mean, we can understand the interpretation, but at that time, for this to happen, and she's woken up in the sweat and this sort of, you know, it's not a nice dream, you know, where a stone is hitting households of Mecca. She calls her stepbrother Abbas and said, look, Abbas, I've heard this, and this is terrifying. You know, I don't know what it means, and, you know, we need to do something about it. Abbas calms her down and says, look, keep this to yourself. Don't tell everybody. This could cause conflict. And don't forget, this is Bani Abdul Muttalib. This is the family of the Prophet ﷺ. And what Abbas does, he told her that, look, keep it quiet. We're not telling everybody. This is between you and I won't divulge it. He goes out and he tells Walid. Walid is, it's a name that you'll come across further. Walid ibn Ubaidah. Now, he tells him, Walid goes and tells his father. The father is one of the chieftains. He's not having any of it. Word just gets around. This gossip is going around everybody, and you know that this impending doom and gloom is going to happen. Word gets back to Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl, who we discussed. Abu Jahl is not having any of it. Next day, Abbas is doing his business in the city. After the city, he starts his tawaf, which was common. Like I said, it was a common practice for everybody to just do your business and then suddenly go around and do the tawaf. And Abu Jahl sees him doing this, and he says, Abbas, when you finish, come and see me. All right, okay. So Abbas finishes his business, goes and finds Abu Jahl wherever he is, sits down, and Abu Jahl is once again taunting him. This was the nature of the beast. This was how he was. Every opportunity that he would get, he would want to take and make full use of this. And he's saying, look, isn't it sufficient that Bani Abdul Muttalib have a prophet already? Now your females are being prophetesses. Now they are making announcements and making predictions, and they're saying this and this. And, you know, it was as if he's actually not only taunting, but being derogative to Abbas. And he's caught Abbas off guard, because Abbas doesn't know that word has got round. He thought him and Walid, and that's it. Nobody else knows about it. But the whole city has heard about this. And, you know, you have to shut her up, and you have to stop this. And if you don't, we'll have to take action. And Abu Jahl makes the statement that, look, you know, 3 days, if it doesn't happen after 3 days, then you see what we're going to do. We're going to make this statement, and we're going to pin it onto the Kaaba. He wanted to make a big hoo-ha about this, that we're going to pin it onto the Kaaba, that the tribe of Bani Abdul Muttalib are liars, and they cause conflict, and they have problems, so all of Mecca will get to know about it. So Abbas is actually caught off guard, and he's denied it all. He said, no, I didn't say this, this was not what I meant, and this and this. So he leaves it and goes back. As he's come back to his house, all the women of Bani Abdul Muttalib have got together. And now they are rebuking Abbas, saying, how come you're not defending us? Are you a man? You should be defending us. And it's all true. You know it's true. And we told you that this had happened. And now in front of Abu Jahl and his sort of henchmen, you've just totally denied it. You've dissed us. So tomorrow you have to go and you have to correct this. So Abbas is, he's in a bit of a dilemma. He's between a rock and a hard place. He's saying, look, on the one hand, I've got my family and the women of the family and the honor to respect and protect their honor. And on the other side, we've got this wretched Abu Jahl as well. So enough courage, and the next day, he has to do something about this. So he's on his way trying to find Abu Jahl, and he sees him in the distance. Oh, he's coming, and I'll tell him now. I'll put him right. And as he's approaching, Abu Jahl sees him coming, but turns the other way and goes. And this is strange because he thought that there would be some confrontation and something to tell him. But what Abbas didn't know was Damdam had arrived. So whatever he had predicted had come true. And Damdam had arrived into the city, and Damdam from the Ghafari tribe. And Damdam has come, but to make it more melodramatic, he's come in and he's actually mutilated the camel. He slit, some say he actually cut off the nose, but he either slit the nose, and blood was on the camel, the blood was en route, and then not only that, he tore his clothes as well to make it, big drama, so people would take note. And he's riding the camel backwards, as if he'd been attacked, and he'd just about got away from this. And he's come in, and as predicted, as the dream felt, he'd went, first of all, he made the announcement there at the Kaaba, and then he went onto the mountain and said, look, prepare yourselves. The caravan, Abu Sufyan, they need your help. We need to go and protect it. Because this was a caravan that everybody had contributed, everybody had invested. Unlike others where some of them had gone and invested the money or whatever. So this time, this was big news, and all the households of Mecca were affected by this. So they then had to rally the troops and prepare and get ready to go and defend. And out of the groups, some big names, Umayyah, who we mentioned, and Umayyah was this, you talk about cowardice. Umayyah was a cowardice. Yes, he could go and beat Bilal and the other sort of slaves, and he was quite a sort of big and hefty character. But he had no appetite for war. He couldn't go out and fight, and he was going to send somebody in his place. So he's preparing from there, but not our friend, but Abu Jahl was not going to have any of this. And Arabs have this sort of tradition and this culture where Abu Jahl takes this perfume to go and gift it to him, and these incense burners. But then there was incense burners for women, and there was for men, different smells, different perfumes, whatever. And he deliberately takes a perfume, a female perfume, to him, to give to him, and say, all right, you don't want to go out to fight, you'll send somebody else and you'll do this. Here, this is, in our sort of culture, my friend sat there, we say wear the rings, the bangles, and you're a woman, you don't deserve to be a leader. So he's actually trying to provoke him, and he falls for the trap. He's ready to go. The other people, Abu Lahab, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. And once again, he's got no appetite. And his excuse is that they are my family. How can I go and fight with them? They are my family, my direct family. And As it would happen, he had a debt that was owed to him, quite a large amount, 4,000 dinar of that time. So he convinced the guy, the debtor, to say, right, instead of me, you go and fight and I will wipe off your debt. You know, and this sort of thing often went on there. So, well, I was not going. There was other characters. I'll write them down actually, because it's what I call the 3 U's. So you've got Utbah, then you got Uqbah, and then you got Umayyah, who we just mentioned. Uqbah, you know, we think Abu Jahl was a wretched person, and no doubt he was. But Uqbah, if you could classify, he was the worst of the worst. This was the guy that was part of the planning to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ. This was the guy that when the Prophet ﷺ was in sujood, he went when Abu Jahl came and was rebuking the Prophet ﷺ, because sujood was new to the Quraysh. This was not something, you know, the posture, the actual position of sujood was new. And they would go to the Kaaba, but nobody, you know, they would say their prayers, whatever. And Abu Jahl said, who would prove themselves? And Uqbah was the guy that went and got the entrails of the sheep or the goat or whatever and came and placed it on the Prophet ﷺ. You know, and you know, the inside of the sheep, whatever, the blood. And this was from the rubbish tip where there's flies and insects and everything. And the one as well, it sort of pains me to even mention it, that, you know, this is the guy that went and did the deed of placing on. And then Fatima came and removed it and whatever, and you know, and the Prophet ﷺ made the dua that, you know, we will get back. There's a name for these groups because there was kuffar who verbally abused the Prophet ﷺ, but there was kuffar who physically attacked. Mutahzi'un in Surah Baqarah is mentioned about them, and we will. The Almighty is saying that we will deal with them. Don't worry about them. I will deal with them. So these, you know, there's a group kuffar, and then there's the Muhtaziyun who are even worse type. So this guy is him. Utbah was a different character. He still had, and we'll see why. And he was the one that was saying, look, they are our family. You know, why should we go to fight them? Why should we, you know, we'll end up going and we'll be killing them, they will kill us. And who's the winner out of this? So he still was in this sort of frame of mind. And even to the last point before his death, which we'll come to, he was always trying to convince them to say, no, don't go, don't go, don't go. But as it turned out, Abu Jahl's intentions, his design overseeded everything. A whole huge army, 1,300 people marched out of Mecca, which at that time in the whole peninsula, nobody had seen this. And they took along their wine, they took along their songstresses, and they were going to have a field day. They were going to turn up, and you know, it was a jaunt in the park for them. They were overcome the Muslims, bring back their caravan, and they would show their prowess to the rest of the tribes of the Arabian Peninsula. So off they started, and they go. At the same time, the Muslim army, when the scouts had come back and told the Prophet ﷺ that this is a huge army, this is a huge caravan, this was to be kept secret. The Prophet ﷺ, and his infinite intellect and his sagacity, his sort of supreme sort of tactician, he did not tell anybody what they were going to do. There was nobody in the room. The Sahaba were told, you know, the rest of them were told to leave, and he's debriefing the scouts. Scouts come in saying, yeah, this is it, we met them there, we saw this, giving all this information. And the Prophet ﷺ gathers them back in and said, right, we're going. Yeah, Prophet, yeah, I'll go and do this. And people were saying, yes, we'll be ready in this time. We're going now. Not later, whenever, we've got to fix this, that. We've got to go, and we've got to go now. So literally, within the hour, the Prophet ﷺ gathered his people, and they marched out. A lot of the people didn't know where they were going, what the reason was. They were just going to obey. And this was the first time that the Ansar joined in. The people of the Aus and Khazraj actually joined in with the Prophet ﷺ. So the numbers exactly, the accepted norm is 300 and give or take 10, 13, 15, but that was the composition of them, out of which 83 were of the Muhajirun. So Muhajirun, the rest was the Aus and Khazraj that joined in with them. To the point where they've marched out of Medina, and that's where the Prophet, because this was to be a surgical strike. They were going to, because 40 soldiers is nothing for them. They've got 300 plus. So they were going to overcome them, bring this booty back, but that element of surprise had to remain. And the Prophet ﷺ decided that we're going to go, and we're going to go now. And they sort of lead out from there. It was only once they'd surpassed a certain point that the Prophet ﷺ was able to take stock of who he had, who's amongst them, who was behind. And another point, because he left behind a Sahaba that was blind, who was to be the governor, the mayor, or a deputy mayor in place of the Prophet ﷺ. You know, this was unusual because that stigma of sight or somebody being infirm or not being able, this never stopped the Prophet ﷺ pointing this Sahaba. Yes, he was blind, yes, but he was an intelligent guy. You know, he had the capability to run the city in the absence of the Prophet ﷺ. The other person that was left behind was Sayyidina Uthman, because the Prophet ﷺ's daughter was unwell. She was very seriously ill. And as much as he wanted to go, the Prophet said, no, you have to stay behind and look after your wife. And once again, you know, it's the superior intellect that the Prophet ﷺ displayed. So they've gone, and amongst them, you know, the majors, Abu Bakr, Umar, Abu Talib, Hazrat Ali, of the tribes, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, the same guy that went down in Friends of Umayyah, he was amongst them. And as they camped outside the Prophet ﷺ, what do you think we should do? The Prophet would often, amongst his Sahaba, he would take their guidance as well. He would seek their guidance. Yes, he's the Prophet, he's the Rasul, he was getting direct wahi, but he was also a leader, and he would show his leadership qualities by taking in their opinions as well. And when he's asked the question, Abu Bakr immediately stands up. Ya Rasul, of course, yes, we will follow you wherever you go, wherever you say. The Prophet ﷺ asked the question again. What do you think we should be doing? Should we go or should we not go? Umar stands up. Yes, Ya Rasulullah, okay, whatever you say, we must do and we will do, and you will find us by your side. The third time, another Sahabi, and once again, the first three were all of the Muhajirun. They're all giving, and they would do because they're from Mecca, they're the same people. The fourth time, the Prophet ﷺ stands up and says, what do you think we should do? Now, this was an indication to Sa'd. He knew that the question was being directed towards the Ansar. And he understood. He said, Ya Rasulullah, we guess that you are pointing, or you're pointing towards us to ask us our opinion. And let me assure you, let me tell you that you will find us standing shoulder to shoulder. We will be with you wherever you lead us. And the Arabs have this phrase that if you lead us out into the sea or charge into the sea, we will be by your side. Going into the sea for an Arab is certain death. These are nomadic desert people. They don't see the sea. They don't see, water. So rushing into the water, because they're non-swimmers, they're not people geared up for this. So he gave his assurance from the Ansar. And this brought an amazing sort of, once again, one of the sayings is that the Prophet ﷺ's face lit up like the moon. You know, the brightness, the shine, this brought joy to the Prophet ﷺ. So immediately this was then accepted and they carry on their journey. How are we doing for time? Are we okay? Yeah? Are we all awake? I've not put people to sleep, have I? No? We'll carry on further because, I mean, we're just scratching on the surface here. We're not even getting into it, but I just thought it would be relevant to set the scene for this. So we have a little bit more of an appreciation of that. So they carry on their journey. They end up on the outskirts of Badr. Badr is, I don't know, has anybody been out there? Has anybody seen the plains of Badr or the wells of Badr? No? Badr is quite a flat land between the mountains. It's renowned because there's a series of wells. There's one main well and there's some smaller wells. And wherever wells were grown, and whoever had first dug up the well was named after Badr, and so hence that area is known as the plains of Badr or the wells of Badr. And wherever there's water, automatically you get an oasis, because water in the desert is the lifeblood. It's the sort of mainstay of everything sort of goes around there. Usual halt for travelers as well. But as I say, it's more closer to Medina, but it's not quite halfway. It's just slightly beyond halfway from them. And this route was going to be taken. But what Abu Sufyan did was that as soon as he got wind of it, yes, he sent Dum-Dum, and Dum-Dum's gone and made the alert. But then he was clever enough. He hired a local guide, and then he's taken a different detour. Instead of the main, he would sort of go closer to the sea, and literally rode overnight again. So he would avoid this impending battle or this raid that would happen. One of the other sort of ideas that why the Muslims, yes, there was a number of 315, 313, whichever, but, they were not prepared for war. They had not gone out for this purpose of a battle. They had limited horses, they had limited camels, they had equipment, they'd not prepared themselves, with all the weapons of the war. And for them, it was going to be a quick recover back. So they've gone with that sort of intention, and it was always this intention of let's do the raid and be back. Obviously, Abu Sufyan is not prepared for it, and he then takes a detour and tries to avoid and manages once again. And then he sends word to the Quraysh to say, look guys, we're okay. No need for this. Let's go back. Let's turn back. But Abu Jahl is not having any of it. He's come for much more than this. And the revelation in the Quran also mentioned that, if you guys, and I'm sort of loosely interpreting, if you guys had planned to fight, you would never have been able to do that. This was planned by the Almighty. This meeting, this clash, this encounter was going to happen. And there's several reasons for this, and we'll obviously go in a bit more detail. Abu Sufyan sends word back to the army that had rode out, and they've decided, no. We've come out, we've made this effort, we've got everybody together. We need to show our strength. The whole of Arabia needs to understand what the Quraysh is all about. We are the superpower. We're going to show everybody, and we're going to prove ourselves, and we're going to ride to Badr, and we're going to have 3 days, we're going to slaughter animals, we're going to hear the songs and drink our wine, and we'll show them. So they decide to continue. Our friend there, Utbah, is saying, no, guys, look, we're safe. We came out for this reason. Our caravan is safe. Let's turn around and go back. But Abu Jahl, he knows how to wind people. He's a master of this. 10 minutes, yeah, okay. I'll try and just quickly wind up because we'll have a question and answer session as well. And then let's take it a little bit further, yeah? Because we're getting to the interesting bit now. The Muslims arrive, and they arrived the day before. So the Quraysh is still on the way. Muslims arrived at the wells. And at the wells, obviously they feed the animals, they take rest, they prepare themselves, and they're disappointed because they missed out again. They missed out at Ushara, now they missed out again. And they're just, what should we do? How should we do it? And just taking stock of their position here. But arriving a day earlier, that gives them the free access. And the Prophet ﷺ makes camp. He makes camp, but then one of the Sahaba comes and asks the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, this place that you've made the camp, is this from your own strategy or your own will, or has this been ordained by the Almighty? And the Prophet ﷺ says, no, this is my own strategy, this is what we thought. So he corrects the Prophet ﷺ, instead of here, let's go beyond, let's take control of the wells. If we're in control of the water, we're in control of the whole scene. So they reallocate the camp to there. Next day, as they're coming up, they knew that the water was there in the wells, so they sent two guys, cooks or servants or whatever, go and collect the water, bring back, because they're still a little bit behind. And as they've come and they've taken water, the Muslims captured them. And remember I mentioned about the scouting. This was one of the times where the Prophet ﷺ is in a real dilemma because they've missed out before. Second time round, he wants to get the information himself. He and Abu Bakr go out, and they go near to the camp. And once again, they meet a Bedouin, and they're going to get information. And the Prophet ﷺ asking this Bedouin, have you heard about the Quraysh army or Muhammad's army, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because he's asking it in such a way where he's not giving himself away. He doesn't know, the Bedouin doesn't realize who he is, but he needs this information, and therefore to balance it out, he's asking, have you heard about the Quraysh? Have you heard about Muhammad's army? I believe that they're going to get together, they're going to be a fight, or they're going to be a battle. Have you heard anything? The Bedouin looks at him and says, well, who are you? Who are you to ask me? You tell me who you are, I'll tell you what I know. But once again, the Prophet ﷺ, it's amazing. It's simple questions, but the way that they're put and the way that they're asked, that he gets the information that, okay, you tell me what you know, and I will tell you who we are. And so the Bedouin says, yes, we saw them further down, and there's a large army. These people, don't forget, they didn't know how to count. A large number was 60, 70 people for them. And this was 1,300 people. And they were at such and such a place because he's pinpointed and told them. And we believe that the Muslims are coming, and they're 300, 310, or they're a large number. And the way that they used to find out was that the Prophet ﷺ would ask, how many camels are they slaughtering on journey? Because you would know how many each camel would be feeding, and therefore you could calculate, how many there would be. So he's got the information from this Bedouin. Now the Bedouin is asking, who are you? Now you tell me what you know about. And the Prophet ﷺ had phrased the question in such a way and told him that he was going to, because obviously he's not going to lie the one na'uzubillah, this is not something that the Prophet ﷺ would do. But so the Bedouin is asking, so who are you? Where are you from? Not who are you, where are you from? And the Prophet ﷺ gave the answer, and it's a strange answer, but it's right, because he was saying, we are from water. And as soon as he said this, him and Abu Bakr ride off. But he now knows the information about the Quraysh there. And as they go, the Prophet ﷺ in this real sort of dilemma, you know, the army is coming, we're not prepared for war. We'll wrap up, we'll carry on from here. We'll ask the questions if that's okay. Yeah? Right. I've been told. So really, we've come to a point, we'll leave it at this point. I'm sorry that I've gone maybe into a bit more detail than necessary, and we're not taking it as further as we would have liked to, but hopefully at some stage that we can conclude and finish this off, because now is where it's getting interesting. So it's more almost like a soap opera, you know, we've taken it up and there's enough of interest, but it's not fully there. And next time we'll carry it to the conclusion, because obviously the battle itself, the aftermath as well, and the lessons to be learned from this, and there's a whole, you know, I mean, Surah Anfal, if you read it, this whole surah is revealed on the Battle of Badr. This is so important that, you know, the whole surah is dedicated to this, and the amount of lessons to be learned is just phenomenal. You know, if we spend a couple of days on it, it just wouldn't do it justice. So if you allow me to stop there, and I'll be open to any questions on the subject today, if that's okay. Please.